When do you know it's time for a website or homepage redesign? And when do you know it's time for a full rebrand, if ever?
Rebrands are like therapy for your company sometimes.
No matter how many times you've done it or how long you think it's going to take, it is always going to take longer than you think.
The best reason for a brand redesign is that the story you're trying to tell or who you're trying to tell that story to has changed fundamentally.
I think a lot of the good reasons to do a web redesign kind of boil down to we've had a meaningful shift in our fuel and engine strategy, and therefore our website needs to, align with that.
The people that loved the ball pit most were actually the engineers and the marketers, and rarely do those groups bond.
Brands bring people together.
This is just like summer camp, but about B2B marketing.
Welcome to Dear Marketers, produced by MKT1 and Caspian Studios in partnership with Typeform. This is a show where me and some of my closest marketing friends answer questions from you. I'm here with my dear friends Jenny and Grace, and this will make sense in a second. We have Jenny Tai, who's head of content at Vansa, whose personal brand is creme fraiche, including owning a dog named Boucle. What that means is she loves shades of beige and off-white, but I wasn't allowed to say beige. I had to say creme fraiche. Yeah, which is hard for me to say. And we have Grace Erickson, who is the VP of Revenue at Cocoon, and whose personal brand is Mid-Century Sea Ranch Cabin. She's an Airbnb superhost, and she's really living it. And then we actually have there are four hosts today. I have three co-hosts. And the fourth co-host is a special guest who was on our team at Asana back in the day and is a brand expert. She also ran an agency. I'll say more in a second. But we have Kelsey O'Royan here with us today. Welcome, Kelsey, to our weird podcast world. The other fun fact about Kelsey, before I get into her actual professional background, is that prior to being a professional, she went to summer camp with me our whole lives. And I was a counselor when she was a camper. And then not only that, but she referred me to my job at Asana and actually to my job after that as well.
You have Kelsey to thank for your full being.
Yeah, and because of that, every time I'm with her, I buy her free coffees, like for life.
Hi, it's so nice to hang out with you again. This is just like summer camp, but about B2B marketing.
It's just like summer camp. We could talk about summer camp for like a full season of a podcast, maybe multiple, but we will not, because then people that didn't go to summer camp feel really left out, and we wouldn't want that. But Kelsey was most recently head of brand and creative at Front. And then prior to that, ran an agency that she was a co-founder of and creative director called Paladar Studios. So she's both run a creative agency as well as led creative at brand. Kelsey's personal brand, which I forgot to mention, is a charcuterie board full of stone fruit.
Only stone fruit on it, or
No.
are there other things too? Just stone fruit is an addition.
Most people don't put stone fruits on their charcuterie boards.
I have an annual party called Stone Fruit Festival, in which there is a lot of stone fruit on the board.
What is a stone fruit?
It's a fruit that has a stone in it.
Like, name a couple.
Like a nectarine, a cherry.
Peaches. I know what they are, but I've known you for like 30 years, so obviously I've always known, but I didn't know if it was just because I knew you or if everybody knows what a stone fruit is.
No, I think everybody knows.
For the people. Okay, cool. Today, it's very meta to go to our question because our question is actually from Kevin at Typeform, and he did submit his question via Typeform. Kevin's asking about two things. He's asking about web redesigns and brand redesigns, and sometimes those two things go together, and sometimes they don't. So let's go to Kevin for his question.
Dear marketers, I am Kevin Branscombe, Senior Director of Brand Marketing at Typeform, and I have a bit of a chicken and an egg question for you. When do you know it's time for a website or homepage redesign? And when do you know it's time for a full rebrand, if ever? I feel like one often triggers the other, but it's not always clear which should come first or whether either is actually the right move.
Let's go through and give quick thoughts. Have you ever gone through a redesign of any kind? Kelsey, don't answer because you've done like 5,000 redesigns. So Jenny and Grace, you are the only two that get to answer this question.
Yes, I can go first.
I'm so glad we had Kelsey on. We're involving her so much already.
So I've been in B2B marketing for probably 15 years at this point, and I've done at least 3 redesigns, both web and design together. So when I was at Yammer way back in the day, I did 1 full web and design kind of refresh. And then we did like a halvesy one, like a year later. And then shortly after I joined Vanta, I helped launch and announce the redesign, but I basically like wasn't there for all of the heavy lifting, the actual redesign work.
Were you there for the Asana redesign, Jenny? No?
No, I joined a few months after.
Kelsey and I were definitely there for that. And Kelsey, I think, also owned like the employer brand at the time. So way to just crush it on that. We got Grace and Jenny simply because of the rebrand and how it carried forward to the employer brand or something like that. But look, we did great. Kelsey, I think that like you, obviously, when you were at Paladar, how many redesigns or brand designs did you do you think?
We did a lot. But one of the interesting things that happened a ton is that clients would reach out to us looking for a website redesign. And sometimes we'd take a look at that and it would be like, hey, I think your brand needs some work before you need a website redesign. So that happened a lot too, where we would actually start with a fundamental brand work and then lead to the redesign, which is another path.
Did you ever advise the other way? Like, hey, I don't think you actually need a brand redesign, and I think you can just redo the website in this brand system? Or did you just like want to make money and not say that?
I think a lot of people want to do a website redesign and they have nothing, it has nothing to stand on. And so then it might feel like a little bit more like a brand evolution and not a full rebrand. Which is a path we recommended sometimes.
Yeah, which we'll talk about a little bit more. I'll answer the question myself just for context. I think I've done some sort of rebrand or web redesign at every company I've been at, which I guess is like a trope for like heads of marketing, but it hasn't been initiated by me always, so I'll give that. When I was at Ticketfly way back when, we did like a minor brand refresh, and then I left, and then 2 years later they did another brand refresh, and then the logo looked like a cult symbol, and then they got acquired, so it no longer lives on. But there was that. And then when I was at Asana, we did a big web brand product positioning, everything update all at once on the same day. Like, it was so intense that I know that it was September of 2015. Like, it like stands in my mind. It's one of the only like career dates I can point to because it was that big of a deal. And then at the early stage startup I was at after that, Astro, like we just built the brand while I was there and the website. And so that was like a first branding. I don't know what to call that. We just did the brand and the website from scratch. And then at Carta, they had just changed their name from eShares to Carta prior to me joining, and nobody really knew that the name had changed. And so there is a website in place, but then that had all kind of been done for the renaming pretty quickly. So we went back and kind of revisited that and updated it. And then they've since redone the full logo, which was something that had been talked about when I was there, but I didn't participate in. So I've seen a lot of evolutions of brands and been involved in like all different parts of this process and talked to lots of companies about it too that I work with. So I've seen it all, good and bad and ugly in some cases too. Grace, have you ever done a redesign?
Yeah, so in 2023 at Cocoon, we did a wholesale brand redesign, brand, website, product, all on the same day, just like Asana. It was also September 2023, burned into my memory. And then at the small benefits company I was at before that, we did a full web redesign while I was there. I feel like actually my whole time there, I was constantly redesigning the website. So that's something to talk about. At Carta, Emily, you and I developed a sub-brand together. We built a whole new website for.
Thanks to our partner Typeform, which has been my go-to form builder for years. I've been partnering with Typeform all season long on the pod, and I like them so much that today I even let Kevin from their team ask this episode's question about web and brand. But anyway, when you update your brand, you need to extend it to every touch point, not just your website. And Typeform makes that super easy. Just add your colors, logos, fonts, etc. to your brand kit in Typeform and have an on-brand form every time, not a dull traditional form. When I created the Dear Marketers brand, that's one of the first things I did. I added my new brand into the Typeform brand kit and built a beautiful form so I could gather questions from you for each episode right away. Once you make a Typeform, you can even embed your forms directly into your website. From a quick no-code landing page capturing NPS, creating an event registration form, or a lead gen form, Typeform can help. Use code MKT1 to get 20% off their annual growth plan. Thanks for being such a big part of Dear Marketers Season 1 Typeform. Let's get back to Kevin's question. And let's focus on the web redesign part here, not the full brand redesign. So when does it make sense? And I guess before we get into that, there's lots of different meanings for what a web redesign means. So what are the different types or ways you can redesign a website? Jenny, you want to take it?
Yeah, I think there's one where you do like a complete redesign of all your pages. So it's like you're building it basically from scratch again. So that's going to be a very heavy lift. There's one that's probably more of like more of a lighter weight refresh or facelift. This could be like a web refresh. So maybe you're updating some core pages, updating some of the copy, maybe updating some of the visual elements. And then there's probably something in between, but it really just kind of depends on your goals and the scope and the need.
Yeah, I would say the only thing to add there is like sometimes you are changing your CMS. So sometimes you might be changing from Webflow to Framer, or from custom code to something else early on in early days. And so when you say you want to do a web redesign at your company, you should specify or ask others to specify when they ask you to do it. So let's talk about why you might do any or all of these things. Like, Kels, maybe you can start because you've had lots of people come to you in your agency running days that need web redesign. So what are some of the reasons?
Yeah, and stop me if I'm talking about the brand stuff too much.
We will get to the brand stuff. We're just talking about web now, Kelsey.
Stay on message. Well, the first reason that you usually get for someone who wants to do a web redesign is that they just don't like the website. That's usually the first one. But that's never.
But nobody ever says that.
Not liking the website is not a good enough reason to do it unless it's backed in something that maybe it's not converting at the rate that you want. It's not signaling trust, and you might get that information from your sales team in terms of there might be a little bit of a gap in terms of what they're hearing from customers, for example, in terms of there's a mismatch in terms of the promise.
Yeah, or like we seem smaller than we might be is related to
we
this,
got
like,
a lot of that
trust.
up front.
Yeah.
Convince people you're a real company is, I feel like, a common goal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Another one is that the website isn't like working hard enough in terms of telling what your product is and the value it delivers. So it actually might need to be even more robust than it is so far.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there's just not enough. It could be there's just like not enough page templates. There's not enough variance in like how it's designed. There's not room for like product demos, like whatever it might be.
Well, I think for a small team, being able to like independently update your website, create new pages, all of those sorts of things is a huge unlock for your team efficiency, because your website should never be a static asset for you. And if it's built in a way that you're forced to treat it as a static update or a static asset, or updates take several weeks because it goes in the backlog of your engineering team, that's not an acceptable way to run your website, which is your most central marketing asset. And so I think an excellent reason for a web redesign is to give more control to the marketing team in all aspects.
Yeah, I used to say it was your most important marketing asset, and I do still think it is. But there is a hot take here that very quickly it might not be in the way that it was because of like agentic buying. You will be able to like search about a product and buy it all from like a ChatGPT or like agentic workflow, like probably pretty soon. And so at that point, I think your brand assets will still matter and people will still want to see what your brand is about, but it's shifting. I just digress into like a big topic, which is like, should we even be talking about this? But no, I think we should. And I think it's still important, and there will always be a role of the website. But I think we'll see a lot of people restructuring and rebuilding their websites because like SEO is now less important than like showing up in LLMs, and like people might be discovering you through, these like chat like experiences more so. And so I think we'll see changes, but I don't think it's probably happening as fast as it's happening in my brain. So there's that. Okay, more fun. When does it definitely not make sense to do a web redesign?
Another company just did a redesign, and you're like, oh, that looks cool, and I like the agency they worked with, so we should do it too.
Yeah, Kelsey made it. It looks great.
I want Kelsey to make my website.
Yeah. I think also like very similar is like there's this trend and we're not in it. And like trend chasing is a hard game to play because it does change really fast. We'll talk about that later, I think, especially in our game at the end. We're going to talk about some trends. Little teaser for best marketer at the end. Yeah, I think we also didn't mention back in reasons to do it is I think there's two things here. One is like if you're moving up market or you're moving to kind of add like a self-serve flow or you're working to like add a sales-led flow, like those are all reasons why your website, to Kelsey's point, may not be like as robust as you might need it to be. And so it's sometimes during that, it just makes sense to kind of like start again and restructure it from the beginning. So sometimes the redesign and the design part doesn't come from a design problem as much as it comes from like marketing can't update it or it's not serving our needs. And it makes sense to do it all at once. The other thing I was going to make is like a reason not to do it is like, it's been 2 years, we should do it. I think people think there's like a cadence to do it. And I think the timing just depends on all of the things we just talked about. And it also, I think the timing depends on how many, the more changes you make to your website while it's up, like the faster you're actually going to need a redesign, which is kind of counterintuitive. Like if you're doing a good job and keeping it updated, it's going to get like Frankenstein together faster. You want to keep updating it and keep it being this living, breathing thing. And maybe that doesn't mean you need to go back to a full web redesign, but it does mean you need to kind of like go back and say, do we need to redesign some of these core pages? I'm sure you saw a lot of that, Kels.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think like it's even worth breaking down of like, do I need a full web redesign? And the answer might be probably not, but it might be worth redesigning some of your top traffic pages. And that's a like good place to push back to. It's like at front for us, that was homepage, product page, pricing page. Like those are the most important pages, and landing pages, of course, too. But just like thinking about even at the get-go, like could we get away with a smaller scope? I think everybody updates their homepage, I think at
All
least
the
once
time.
every 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years is a long time for a homepage, actually.
Well, and I think there's an argument to be made for like the weighing like a web redesign versus right the ongoing evolution of your website, because right, just like your website can and should evolve over time, right, because you're testing new messaging, right, you have a specific like design execution for a product launch and that's incorporated on that page, whatever it is. It's also right natural and should happen that the expression of your brand changes over time, still within the confines of your brand, but it gets developed and used and explored and pushed to new limits, and that should be coming through in your website too, as a sort of ongoing living, breathing thing. I mean, I think that is where you get into, like you were saying, Kramer, like the risk that it becomes Frankenstein, and so check yourself. But the reality is it's evolving, and sometimes you need the next step in the evolution versus to tear it all down.
Yeah, I mean, one good reason that we didn't cover really yet is like if you've had a significant pivot in your positioning, or like let's say your startup is growing and you're more mature and you're moving from, let's say, like single product to multi-product solution,
new audiences.
Yeah, I'm like, maybe you need to introduce personalization and like lots of sub messages. So I think a lot of the good reasons to do a web redesign kind of boil down to we've had a meaningful shift in our fuel and engine strategy, and therefore our website needs to, align with that.
Yes. So something else has changed in the business, or it could be the market, but not just like someone else changed their website. So something else has happened that is causing this to need to be done, or just like the marketing team cannot continue to build and scale the thing that we have today, I think are like the reasons. Which is usually driven by more people are hired, or there's more budget, or some other change that's occurring. Okay, when does it make sense to just completely redo your entire brand? And let me like explain what this means. So this means when we were talking about brand here, we're talking about your logo, like your design system, which includes like color, font, photography style, illustration style, all of that, which then would affect your website and often even your product too, because you want that to match. And then everywhere you show up.
All your one-pagers and decks.
I think the best reason for a brand redesign is that the story you're trying to tell or who you're trying to tell that story to has changed fundamentally, and the brand you have is not an expression of like who you are as a company and who you aspire to be. I think at Cocoon, that was the reason. The story misalignment was the reason we did a rebrand in 2023. We had a significant like product change that meant it was the right time for it specifically.
Right.
But Cocoon was started as a product focused on parental leave. It very quickly became focused on all types of leave, but our original logo was created with parental leave in mind, and was very...
Was it like a parent holding a child or what?
playful. No, it was like kind of like a flower sort of a thing. It was, but the colors, the like logo felt very juvenile or like
Juvenile?
juvenile, yeah.
Juvenile.
Juvenile. The logo
like
felt
The logo was so juvenile.
it was so juvenile. The logo felt like it was for a brand focused on children.
Okay.
And with like the colors and
Yep.
the type treatment, all these different things pointed towards a really like joyful brand focused on children.
I've been in this situation before where it's a lot of the stuff we're talking about of like there's a story misalignment or there's a market misalignment actually in terms of like what people think our product does versus what it actually does or where we're going, or there's an audience mismatch, whatever it is. I see oftentimes like people try to solve this with like, I'm going to update the copy on my website or like the hero image or like write different types of content. So I'm going to like plug in this shift into like my normal marketing activities. It's not doing enough. Okay, let's redesign the whole website, right? And it's like, that's not enough. And I think oftentimes people will come to like, hey, I need to do a rebrand because I don't even have the infrastructure to build off of, or there's this huge problem that we haven't been able to solve, or we're at this huge inflection point as a company. I think that's a point where a lot of people need to do rebrands. Like, we're going after a totally different market. We're totally shifting what our product does and our positioning, and we want to signal to the market that we're different now. Or like it's a whole new category creation, like something like that. Or it might be something even more timely of like, okay, we're gearing up for an IPO and we really need to like redesign our brand to appear in the market in a totally different way. So it's like that core inflection point too.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think it's overused for that reason? Like, I feel like it's become more and more of a thing where people are like, big inflection point coming up, or like, this is an exaggeration, but like product launch, we might as well redo our logo. Do you think it's overdone?
I totally think it is. I don't think people think about like brand evolution enough because it's hard. It has to be really strategic. And I also think a lot of companies do rebrands when they don't have a good campaigns motion, because I think like big campaigns are an awesome way to like shift gears and like answer or like speak to that inflection point in a way. And so I think people rely on bigger rebrands too much.
I think they try to use the rebrand as the inflection point versus using the rebrand to like, launch, this next chapter in, the evolution.
And the truth is that it can be a massive money pit and a massive time suck, which I think we'll talk about. So part of avoiding it being a massive waste of money and a massive time suck is to like choose the right agency or freelancer, or to not, because sometimes you can go with an agency and it makes it become huge because you've spent $300,000 on something and it better be the best thing that ever happened to this company. And so you got to make it worth it, which I think, oftentimes you like commit to the scope before the like work to actually define what needs to be done happens, which is kind of gets you into this trouble in the first place, if that makes sense. So I think what we're saying here is like there's a whole spectrum of things you can do, from redoing everything to just like redoing some copy on your site, some positioning, some minor updates. And there's also this path that we think is underused of people basically saying we're doing this big campaign or this big push or this big launch, whatever it is, this big customer campaign. And that is going to allow us to extend the brand in a slightly different direction. Like we're going to play up one color instead of the other just to keep it simple. I know it's not all about color, but like we're going to update the illustration style for this campaign and see how that feels. And then we can use that to kind of usher it in completely, or like all of these things. And so that makes a ton of sense. And we think people probably underuse that.
I think that people also underestimate when you're building a company, repeated recognition of a brand is massively, massively important. So the risk of a redesign is you can take a step back in like the equity you've built with your existing brand. So the reason for the redesign has to be significant enough to make up for some loss of equity. And that's why also, doing a redesign very, very early is lower risk in that context, right? Because you've not built up very much equity.
But it's a bigger risk in terms of,
is it going to be the right time investment?
Well, not only that, but also like usually you have fewer marketers, usually don't have a full-time designer on the team.
Yes.
You don't have as much budget. So you have a chance of just doing like a rebrand that's not worth it, or a new website that's not worth it. So there's this fine line. I think the thing is like people are always like, oh, this is going to take a long time. And no matter how many times you've done it or how long you think it's going to take, it is always going to take longer than you think. The exception to that is like when you're building a brand for the first time, or like the most impressive thing I've ever seen, actually, I think ever seen with a pre-seed startup that I invested in, luckily, was that they went from, I actually helped them come up with a name, which is not normally something I do as an investor, but it was fun. It's better than MKT1, Market 1, whatever the hell the name of my brand is, I promise. But anyway, I came up with the brand name, and then they went from brand to brand system to website, completely launched with multiple pages in 3 weeks total. And they didn't even have a designer at first. And it's pretty decent.
I was going to say, but how good is the brand?
It's pretty decent. No, it's like pretty good. No, it looks really legit. I've never seen anything like it. The hustle, the focus, that never happens. That's like, but then I have companies all the time come to me and be like, so how long is this whole thing going to take? And they're like redoing everything. And they're like, a couple weeks. And I'm like, what? This is going to take months. And not only that, but a lot of these agencies have lead times that are months. So Kels, like, anything to say about like agency lead times and how to think about that before we just go into this bigger topic of how do you choose an agency or a contractor or freelancer to do this work?
Yeah. I mean, good studios have lead time. And so sometimes you get really lucky and people are like, hey, a project shifted and we actually have time to get started next month. But you should start reaching out to agencies as you're like thinking about it. Just have these initial conversations and like see what their timeline is. I think you should expect at least a couple months, sometimes 3 months
for lead time for full brand. For full brand.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also depends on the size. It just depends on the size of the studio that you're working with, and we can talk about that next. Rebrands for small companies, like if you can get a really tight-knit group of people to make decisions fast and have a small scope of things that the brand really needs, like, you know, if you're doing strategy work up front too, we were oftentimes doing rebrands in like 3 months.
What strategy work?
Brand strategy is anything from like helping a company with their positioning, but thinking about their messaging, things like brand beliefs, brand values, what brand attributes are. Yeah, vision, mission, the whole shebang.
Nobody knows the difference between vision and mission, and I will not do a podcast on it because I don't care.
But it's really the foundation for what the brand is built off of.
Yes.
So that you have a reason for why things look and feel the way they do.
What do we care about as a company that like I think the brand strategy should, in theory, like last a lot longer than, say, positioning. It's like, what do we stand for and what are like the core attributes of this brand?
Well, and I would argue if you're not prepared to explore, if you're not either A, very happy with your brand strategy as it is, in which case probably you don't need a redesign, or B, if you're not prepared to do that exploration of that foundation of your brand strategy, you are not prepared to do a brand redesign.
Grace always coming in with the sound bites. Damn.
Because a brand redesign without the foundation of the brand strategy is still just a more dramatic facelift.
Yeah. Ooh, a dramatic facelift.
Like, you're not going to fundamentally change the course of your brand without or your brand design is just going to like fall flat or fall down really quickly if it's not built on the why, like Kelsey is saying. Like, if all the decisions are based on, I like the way it looks, I'm into that color, it makes me feel good, and aren't saying something about who you are as a company, you're going to be in the same position a year later because you're going to change your mind about what color you like.
I should also say, like, the more stakeholders involved, the longer it's going to take. Why could that company do this in 3 weeks? Because there was one decision maker, the founder, and it moves quickly and it has an opinion, and often that's best. So as a bigger company, if you can get your decision making or like true decision making committee down to a smaller number of people, it's going to move fast. Thanks to our partner Framer. Framer is a no-code website builder for projects and startups of any size. If you're thinking about a redesign or want to switch to an easier-to-use CMS, check out Framer. And yes, I officially recommend Framer over Webflow as my favorite CMS these days. Because Framer looks and feels like a design tool and has a much lower learning curve, so marketers can build pages and launch sites easily. They also just launched a program for early-stage startups. Apply to the program to get their launch plan free for a year. Visit framer.com/startups, framer.com/startups. And if you want to use any one of their other plans, use code MKT1 to get 25% off a basic pro startup or scale-up yearly site. I think you should not pick an agency that calls themselves an agency and only pick agencies that call themselves studios.
Definitely, of course.
Yeah, because you say studio. People that run brand agencies always call them studios, but marketers always call them agencies. And there's a brand alignment problem just there alone. But I think you want to go with ones that studio. Oh,
yeah. If you want to move forward, I can tell you why you should pick a studio. No, I'm just saying the difference between
studio is small. I actually didn't really realize that a studio is smaller. I just thought it was like the hip young
Studios craft brands.
Exactly.
Agencies churn them out. That's the difference.
Ooh, another soundbite, Jenny.
Okay, so studios are small. So it kind of goes like agency, contractor, freelancer. I think those people prefer, contractor. Starts with contractor, freelancer. I think most of those people prefer freelancer in the creative world. Correct, Kelsey? Or no?
I think they just are
consultant.
Freelancers. Yeah.
Okay, they are freelancers. Okay, all right. Okay, they're freelancers, and then the nomenclature is important. You don't want to make someone upset before you even start the project. And then a studio, and then you have agencies, and then you have big effing agencies. Holding company style agencies, which nest under, other agencies. Okay, cool. That was really helpful because I honestly didn't realize that about studios. I'm a horrible marketer. Okay, so how do you choose an agency? So rarely are agencies or freelancers, this goes for brand, this goes for everything, as good at web design as they are brand design, as they are product design, as they are messaging and copy. Usually there's one thing they are best at. So you need to figure out what you most need and where your gaps are on your company side and pick the agency for what they're best at. It's just true. Like agencies that are typically really great at brand systems, they're going to be fine at web if they have the right people on the team, but they're not going to knock your socks off with the web stuff. So it might make sense to bring on someone else to help build out those pages or to know this up front. And I think this goes for most marketers and most agencies and contractors in general. Most people have a specialty, figure out what it is.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true and can be an argument for a collection of freelancers or a small studio plus freelancers or working with a studio or agency that you know is going to employ like high quality specialists that they're essentially subcontracting out. But I think,
What's the problem with that, though? That makes me nervous.
yeah, I mean, right, the risk there is if you essentially don't have the same quality control as if you're hiring every single person. And most agencies, they're going to put their A team in front of you. But if you're, again, agency on the big side, they're going to put their A team in front of you. But if you're not one of their bigger clients, you might be getting the BCD team when it comes to the actual execution of the work. And they're going to put, the example of they're going to put their A team's work in front of you as the example of the agency's work, right? They're going to give you references to the people that got the A team, all this sort of thing. And then you're going to be left shocked when you have the D team.
Yeah. So when you go with a capital A agency, make sure you're not getting the B or C team.
Yes.
See what I did there? It took you a minute.
Nice.
All right. Yeah, I think the bait and switch is common. I think this has happened even in situations that I've been on. Like, this definitely happened at Asana. Like, we got the big agency and for all of these different areas. And then like for things like the web redesign part, I think it was like a string of contractors and we never know who actually did the web redesign. So we just did it in-house. So I think you really have to know who you're getting. And this is like my number one piece of advice when working with agencies, not studios or contractors. Know who you are working with and know what they've worked on. I think this also goes to like the importance of references and back channeling as much as you can too.
In addition to references, an excellent starting point regardless is talking to the people or reaching out to people whose websites you think are excellent or brands you think are excellent and say, who did this work for you? How did you accomplish this? Talk me through it. Because also looking at brands that you want to be like, again, not as the reason for your redesign, but you've already decided you have a good reason, and looking at brands you want to be like that, importantly, I think are at a similar stage as you as a company, and asking them, how did they do it? What was the team supporting them? How much did it cost? Like, people are generous with that information and will share with you, and you're going to get a lot further than trying to figure it out yourself.
Yeah. I think there's this interesting thing where I think I used to tell companies like, make sure they've worked on very similar projects to what your company is. Or like at least make sure they've worked on, if they're doing web especially, where on the brand side, I think this is less true. But on the web side, it was like, definitely work with someone who has built a website for your go-to-market motion. If you're a self-serve, like make sure they've designed a website for this. And I still think that's important, but I used to be like, go with the agencies that really specialize in this. And I actually don't necessarily recommend that anymore. I actually recommend going to like agencies or studios or contractors who have a broader portfolio and definitely have a couple of things that match what you want, but are broader. I think you end up getting a better outcome. And a couple episodes ago when I was talking to Jale from Mutiny, I don't even think we put this part in the podcast because it was on sales and marketing alignment and we digressed onto brand. But she was actually saying that like for the Mutiny logo and for their like latest report, they use an agency that mainly does like consumer stuff and is outside of the Bay. Because it just means that you don't get the derivative thing that everyone else is doing. And so, yeah. And Kels, did you think about that at all? Like as a studio, like were you trying to like purposely like pick a diverse set of companies to work with, or were you just like going to the exciting project and crossing your fingers and hoping for the best mix?
I mean, we were super industry agnostic on purpose for the exact reason you mentioned. I think if it's helpful, I think you all have talked so much about like the external stuff of like how to find an agency or who to pick. But I think there's so much like internal, like how an agency works in terms of why you should pick them too. It's not just who they've worked with. Of course, it's who they've worked with and what their portfolio looks like, but it's like how they actually work.
Say more. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think a lot about like, and this depends also on sort of like the size, and this will help you figure out who the right partner is. Of course, there's things like scope and budget, obviously, that can dictate who you need to work with, but it's also about how they work. And what does your internal team look like? And do you need to augment your team? Do you want an agency that is more embedded with your team? Do you need like thought partnership and figuring out things like strategy. Like that was actually one of the biggest things that I saw is some companies where they're like, we really know what our strategy is. We have crisp audience personas. We already have our brand attributes. Maybe we want to tweak them. We know what our mission is. We know what our vision is. And then there were other companies that were like, we don't even know what those things are at all. And we need help with that. Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, what sort of a design system do you need, for example? Like, do you have one single designer and therefore you need a really robust design system that this one designer and some contractors can follow? Or do you just need to, like, get something out there and then your internal team, like we did at Asana, can, like, take it and build off of it? So I think those questions are really helpful in identifying the right partner, just as much as like what experience do they have, because great brand people are going to be able to be industry agnostic, I think.
Yeah, I think there's this interesting thing too that I see where actually like some of like the smaller startups that actually need all of the like most of the pages on their site designed and need like templates for things like what they're going to do on social or how they're going to make their diagrams or all of these things actually are like, we don't need all that stuff. And then they get into a situation where maybe they save money on this, but they actually are going to spend so much money on revisions of all of those things in the future when they're working with like a contractor just on like make these things for social or make this video style or whatever it is. They're going to spend so much more time in the back and forth by not having that well defined up front that you're actually going to end up spending more money. So something to think about is like, you're not necessarily saving money by going to someone else, but at the same time, that bigger agency or that agency that did the brand redesign might not know how to make all those things. So it's this fine line of like laying out everything you are going to need from start to finish and then saying like, who's going to do these things and do I have the best suited people to do them or anyone to do them? And that's a job for you internally at the company if you're leading this. Like, don't expect the agency to map out everything you're ever going to need because they don't know, because everybody's marketing strategy is different. So there's a real challenge in this.
And I think a big part of that is taking a very honest look at your team and yourself as a marketing leader to know where your strengths are and where you need more support. If you don't have a team that has experience in brand or is inclined toward brand, you probably need a really hands-on agency or studio that is going to guide you through this process. Right? Like probably a mix of freelancers is not the move for you if you don't have some amount of experience.
A strong creative person on your team. Yeah. So I guess like most things, there's a framework here. You want to make a GACS brief, goals, audience, creative, channels, stakeholders, and you want to share that with the agency. And I think people make terrible briefs for these things. And if you can't make a good brief that like explains what you need, your project is going to fall super flat no matter the agency that you choose. So there's some pre-work. I guess, Kels, are there things that like often were missing in briefs or like upfront, like, you know, in RFPs or things when people would reach out that would just be missing all the time?
Yeah, but it was kind of surprising. I think I have a weird view on it because I came from in-house. And so a lot of times people would give us briefs and I'm like, hey, I think you could use templates that will really serve your team moving forward, right?
Not a template for the brief, a template for the pages.
Yeah. Template for pages, templates for ads, templates for whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So we were thinking a lot about like, hey, I actually think this would serve your team better in setting them up for success in the long term. So I think that's something to think about is like, what does your team actually need right now?
Yeah, I think it's also interesting. Some studios and agencies have projects. Most of them have some sort of producer or project manager, but you're going to get very different things. So like if Kelsey's agency was called Paladar. And so if you're working with Paladar, Kelsey was going to like be the creative director, but also be the producer, project manager, coordinator, all of those things. And if you don't have someone, I think that understands the in-house like B2B startup marketer experience in that role, it can be tough if they've like only ever worked at agencies or they're like new to that role. So that actually, I think, matters more than people think. People often look at like who's the creative on this, and that matters, but it also matters like who's running the project that you are going to be interacting with day to day.
Right, because the success of your redesign is going to be, you know, kind of evaluated through the lens of like, how effective can your team use it on a day-to-day basis? You're not going to be doing a redesign every year, hopefully. So having someone who understands okay, how do we actually scale and operationalize this and make sure that people internally are trained on the new design system and we have the right templates in place so that we don't need to, have our designers making blog header images every day. I think that's really critical to actually making it feel real and bringing it to life.
Kelsey, anything we got wrong there? I'm just using you as my bullshit tester because I haven't run an agency.
I don't know if this is helpful. The other thing that I would think about a lot, if you're doing a rebrand, I really think that rebrands are like therapy for your company sometimes. And I think you want to choose a thought partner who is going to help you make decisions and be a forcing function for you to make decisions to move the work forward. And I think that is a really important piece of criteria and is also going to help your project be set up for success in the long term and move a lot faster. And so I think, especially if you are doing a rebrand, you are not just looking for an executor. I really encourage people to look for thought partners in that process as well.
Yeah. I think this brings up a good point, which is how do you avoid design by committee, which we're going to end with in a second here. Not only are you looking for someone who's kind of your brand therapist, but you're actually looking for someone sometimes that can help broker those internal debates. And so a lot of times it's well, me as a marketer, maybe I could project manage this or produce this and bring together all the freelancers, but I'm going to be a person with an opinion here. And so a neutral third party is going to be really helpful. And I think the same goes with positioning projects. Often people are I think we know our market, we know our audience, we know our story better than anyone, so why would we go external for positioning? And it's well, for exactly that reason, is you need to get outside of it. You know too much, and you're suffering from groupthink already, whether you think it or not, or you have natural biases where you're arguing over something for no reason because you've just been arguing over for years or whatever, or have a disparate opinion on something. There's just history there. There's history there. There's baggage there, and so often just having someone that's going to help broker that is worth it alone so you can get out of that groupthink. And so one of our other friends who also runs an excellent brand agency who Kelsey sometimes partnered with, Jess, who runs Good Side, just shout out because she's going to be why didn't you have me on this podcast? And the answer is that this came together with Kelsey yesterday when we were chatting about something else. So that's why. But the point is that she said something on LinkedIn not too long ago that I really liked. She said something along the lines of if you ask a big group of people what kind of ice cream to get for the group, you're always going to end up with chocolate and vanilla. You're not going to ever end up with something interesting, but you're going to end up with chocolate or vanilla ice cream. I'm trying to work in milk here. We try to work in milk in every episode. Is there an ice? You're not going to end up with a milk chocolate brownie flavor, for instance. I really tried
We
hard
just
there.
discovered a very good ice cream flavor. It's Jenny's ice cream, which
I love
know
Jenny's ice cream.
Yeah.
a fave. I saw it on
No
marketing
association.
team.
No association.
I don't know what it's called, but it's basically pancake batter in vanilla ice cream. It's
Oh,
very
yes.
good.
What is that one called?
I don't know. I'll look
I
it
can
up.
picture
But
the
you still didn't
packaging.
get the word milk in there.
It's made
Kelsey,
of
if you're-
milk.
Oh, they have
okay.
milkiest chocolate.
Okay,
Jenny's
there we
has
go.
milkiest chocolate.
I was so excited about, I think I hard liked all of the Got Milk ones. When I was a kid, my entire wall was plastered with Got Milk ads.
You are the perfect co-host. We didn't know that. There's always a weird
Would you
coincidence in
say
these.
that was your part of your personal brand? Would you?
Totally. Well, I think it was the first campaign I ever loved.
Oh, did you have them in your Camp Nokomis bunk? Did you have them in
No,
your bunk? Yeah.
I used to when I would go to the dentist or something, I would quickly flip through all of the magazines and
steal
rip
them?
them out. Yeah, just those pages. And they were plastered all over my wall as a kid. I had all of them.
But did you bring them to camp and hang them in your bunk? Is what I'm asking you.
No, they didn't transport well.
I didn't
I had,
know if you found new ones. All right, so how do you avoid ending up with vanilla or chocolate ice cream as a brand or as a website? Because it not only happens with brands, but it also happens with websites where they're just boring and look the same.
Well, I mean, go back to your GACs, be really clear about your goals and the outcomes you want to achieve. Define the stakeholders up front so that you can agree, right off the bat that it's just going to be a small group weighing in. making the decisions. I think in your early explorations, if you're working with an agency, like have them show you different options and push them to be bold, and kind of, think outside of the boring boxes. Because if it's early in the game, you can kind of kind of take some risks, see what's possible, and then kind of pick a direction and go from there. But I think if you're starting from boring, then you're not gonna really go beyond that.
Yeah. I think also often people will see, and I've been guilty of this too, where you like get an option A, B, and C from an agency or a studio. And then you're like, I want A plus B with a side of C.
Yeah.
And like that doesn't work either. So you like combining them, sometimes it can work a little bit. Like sometimes there's certain elements that can be combined, but like
I think that's why I like to ask for 3 very different directions, because then it's like then that's not a possibility.
yeah. Yeah, perhaps if they can be combined, they're not disparate enough. I don't know. How did you think about presenting those, Kelsey? Did you have like an order that you would do? Like we would always put our favorite second, or like I think Jess at Goodside does that. I think she puts her favorite second.
Yeah, for sure. But okay, this is like my hot take on making decisions as a brand. Like you might not like your rebrand. Like you personally might not like your rebrand, but it might be the right brand for the company. And so I think we, like as a studio, we always spent so much time on brand attributes, and brand attributes might not be the right thing, but like you should have a decision-making framework or framework. Is that what I'm supposed to say?
It's only a framework if I came up with it.
Got it. Okay.
It's a Kels work.
But you probably taught me this, so it probably is a framework that like
okay,
infiltrated
cool.
my brain, as my mentor and camp counselor. But I think there have been rebrands that I've done that I didn't like, but they were right for the company and they performed really, really well and they stood out in this space. And so I think that's something really important to keep in mind. Like you might not like the brand, but the brand might be right.
Do you think that's ever true of the founder? Like, do you think you can say that to a founder? Like you might not like the brand? Because I think it depends on how late stage the company is.
I mean, I think a founder should always be involved in the rebrand process. And
they should be involved, but they're not the target audience always, right?
But I think, like Kelsey's saying, it goes back to like those brand attributes and nailing the brand strategy at the very beginning. I think what's really important is that the founder is deeply aligned with your brand strategy and your brand attributes.
Hugely.
And then the expression of those things is up for debate.
Yeah, like the founder can't just come in at the end and weigh in on the visual stuff, because that's like the worst thing that can happen.
I think what Kelsey is saying is that when you have that foundation to evaluate every single decision against, you've now created like a logic-based framework for something that is very subjective decision making.
We were really good about this at Asana too. Like we had certain words that were the brand attributes, and we would actually in every creative review be like, does it match with these 4 words? Like almost maybe to like an extreme point that was a little too much, because like what does it mean to be like purposeful and empowering? I don't know, but like we would try to like anchor it back to like these are the attributes and these are the things that we care about. And so it can be something, oftentimes people get those and then they like throw them away after the redesign, but it can actually be a really useful tool in feedback, not only during the process, but also like far into the future.
I am like brand attributes #1 fan, cheerleader, promoter, whatever.
I think I have an old template on like coming up with brand attributes that maybe you helped me with or something, like an OG framework that I'm going to resurface now. And then I'm going to have to put it in my new brand. I should have told like the story of like why I changed my brand. It's not that interesting. I'll put it in the newsletter. The one thing I like doing with founders is be like, before we start, are there any things that are just like absolute no-goes for you? Is it like it doesn't matter how rational. Is it like the color pink? Is it serif fonts? Is it black and white photography? I don't know. I'm just like, is it the flat illustrations that we all used to use a while ago? Is it like, do you only like dark mode, like dark backgrounds? Just before you start.
Are there things that give you an ick?
Are there things that give you an ick? It doesn't matter how rational. Like, this is the time. Or like look at a bunch of other websites and be like, what do you hate about this?
What are your allergies is what we used to ask.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. But like going through websites and trying to find these out beforehand because that's the time to do it, is up front. Like, just say what it is you really don't like, because if I know you don't like purple, it's going to be way more helpful now. Get as much information like that, I think, from like founders and the people that are going to be blocking in the decisions up front. So as much as you can get it early, the better.
At that stage, it's also helpful to like do some competitive analysis and just literally show all of your main competitors' websites next to each other and be like, this is how this looks. So part of, the goal here is to use brand as a competitive differentiator, especially if your space is super crowded and you basically have feature parity. It's really easy to copy each other's features. It's a lot harder to copy someone's brand, especially if it's grounded in a strong strategy. And it's not just kind of like the facelift and the visuals.
I'm trying to think if I think that's true, if it's harder to copy someone's brand. I think it's more obvious when someone copies your brand versus a feature. Like, it's like kind of like par for the course.
It's easy to copy branding, but not the strategy, because the strategy is internal.
If you have a strong brand strategy, then you have a company narrative design that is rooted in emotion. And that is the thing that is nearly impossible for another company to steal, replicate.
Yeah, you can't copy someone's vibes.
Oh.
Soundbite. Can't copy someone's
You
vibes.
can't copy someone's vibes. Like, nobody else can be a personal brand that is a charcuterie board full of stone fruit.
Well, and someone else could make a charcuterie board filled with stone fruit, but it would be clear that there was substance lacking underneath.
Yeah, we could spot the imposter.
Because they couldn't tell you the names of the stone fruit.
They wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know what we're talking about anymore, but okay. So I think there's a bunch of interesting questions here around like budget, and like it's not fun to talk about like numbers and budget. So I think I'll put those in the newsletter too. I'll put some like general scopes of budget. There's a broad range between doing some minor updates to positioning, content, videos, and screenshots and all of that, to a complete brand redesign with a logo and product. One is a very strategic company level decision at one end, and the other can be largely driven by marketing. So understand where you fall, what your scope is, and what's needed, and then start to reach out to agencies, studios, and contractors. Make sure you have a good scope. Make sure you know the stakeholders. Limit the number of stakeholders as much as possible. It doesn't mean people can't be looped in, but you need to know who the decision makers are so you don't end up with vanilla ice cream. Nobody wants that, especially me, chocolate girl, mint chip.
Jenny's Wildberry Lavender.
Jenny's Wildberry Lavender. I like flavors that have like as many words as possible. Anyway, I got stuck thinking about ice cream. I have an ice cream cone tattoo, just in case people were wondering how much I like ice cream. Other things is like, it's always going to cost more and take more time than you think. So just know that up front, and like over budget. And I think the number one thing to remember here is there needs to be a reason. And you need to think through that reason because of all those other things I just mentioned about the money pit and the time suck. And talk to a few agencies. Don't just go with one. Talk to a few. See who you gel with. Just because an agency did great work for another client doesn't mean they're going to do great work for you, or a studio, or a contractor, or a freelancer. Just like one candidate might be great for one company, but not yours. It's the same thing. Studios, which we had just learned the definition of, and agencies are super helpful for web and brand redesigns. It's great to get experts who have done the work many times. And the same is true for your marketing ops and demand gen work. There's so much to stay on top of, so many best practices that are changing all the time. And so getting an agency who knows how to work with B2B startups adds so much value, especially if you've added lots of new data enrichment, outbound, and signal tools this year, or if you want to. You're going to feel the RevOps pain if you aren't already. 42 Agency can help you with the setup or cleanup jobs so you can actually use all of the latest and greatest tech. They'll handle the MOPS work your team avoids, from routing logic to fixing scoring, aligning HubSpot and Salesforce, to running campaigns as an extension of your team. Visit 42 Agency, that's the numbers 42agency.com, and mention MKT1 to get a free 30-minute MOPS support call. The team at 42 will troubleshoot an issue or audit your setup. This is available to the first 10 startups who reach out after the podcast. Thanks, 42. Now it's time for Best Marketer, where I quiz my co-hosts. I want you to think back to the history of B2B. What is your least favorite B2B website trend and why? And bonus points for like creative naming of these website trends.
This is both a website and branding trend I've noticed. It's a current one, which is the use of the sparkle emoji to denote anything AI. I'm seeing it everywhere. We are guilty of this.
Wait, you know what's so funny is I was literally just going to say we got through a whole podcast on creative stuff. I mentioned ChatGPT, but we barely mentioned AI, which is amazing.
I love that for us.
Yeah, like you probably might use AI to make some of your creative assets, so know that, but probably not for your homepage.
Well, we also didn't talk about the use of emojis in brands, which is a whole
hot topic.
I use emojis a lot.
I do too. I do love emojis.
Let me tell you why.
I've come around.
Yeah, on LinkedIn, there's no bullets. Like, there's no formatting. So you've got to, like, delineate it so people can scan. And then I started doing it in the newsletter, too, because they're so long. But
Well, and I think it's like, when does it make it to the website? Like, on LinkedIn, I can accept it, but like, if we're emojis on the website, I don't know. I'm not. An email, maybe. A newsletter, yeah.
quick thing. When did we evolve from the robot meeting AI to the sparkle? And, like, would you rather people still be using their robot?
I
Or
want to say
people-
I started noticing it in the fall of 2023, and it's still here to stay. And the reason why it bothers me so much, because I think it's a great metaphor for how a lot of B2B companies are thinking about their AI strategy, which is we're just going to sprinkle it on.
Oh, sprinkle. It's not sprinkles on ice cream. It needs to be core to the flavor. One of our sponsors was Brand 24, and you can do like track mentions of things over time, like mentions of your brand. But I wonder if you can track use of emojis over time corresponding with words. Like sparkle with AI. Like, I'm curious to see that trend over time. All right. What is your least favorite B2B website trend, Kelsey or Grace? Kelsey seems excited. Go for it, Kels.
I hate stock photography, but sometimes there might be some other people who don't like stock photography. It's a common thing I hear. But okay, I think the B2B version of like woman laughing with salad or something is teams standing around a whiteboard doing a creative brainstorm.
Pointing. Oh, yeah.
You see so much. That's not as much right now, but like, okay, I just can't stand everyone standing around, and I've probably produced plenty of those shoots, but like standing around a whiteboard or like doing the creative brainstorm. I hate those.
Wait, so I have been in those photo shoots.
Yeah, I was going to say, we did our own photography at Asana, but we were brainstorming around a whiteboard. Let me tell you.
A lot.
There's a picture of me sitting on the table with the rest of you putting sticky notes on a whiteboard that we use this like a stock photo all the time at Asana. We need to resurface this. You all remember this photo?
I think I have it.
Yes.
There is also a photo of me laughing with salad. Let me find those.
Jenny laughing with salad. If you are a power Asana user and you go in deep in Asana, you can see that a lot of the like stock profile photos are actually like, I think Jenny's still in there and Grace might be
I saw
too.
Jenny on a billboard like a year ago.
Oh yeah,
What?
I'm still in ads. They use my avatar.
In Philadelphia, I saw Jenny on the side of the highway, and I said, I know her.
You got to be getting royalties.
I wish.
Should definitely be getting paid for that. What is your least favorite B2B website trend and why?
Okay, far and away, my least favorite is B2Blue. But it's not even B2Blue, it's software blue. It's not limited to B2B.
It's everywhere.
We are all using blue in every way.
Oh, this
AI
is a
sparkles
competition?
It's a game, Kelsey.
It's a game.
Oh, I could have come out swinging. You guys have all been preparing.
Let me explain this to you, Kelsey. So the show is called Dear Marketers, like a letter to marketers. Dear Marketers, comma. So it's called Best, comma, Marketer. It's like our sign off. I don't think a lot of people realize this. It's like love
I don't
marketing.
think people are picking up on it.
But okay, well that's why I'm explaining
Kelsey's
it.
not,
It's
clearly.
like love, comma, marketers. It's best, comma, marketer. It's like it's really just me that thinks it's clever. But it's a
man.
game. It's best marketer. Yeah, it's a game. So, okay, Kelsey, what is the best way to celebrate a rebrand? This isn't a best marketer. This is just a closing thought. We all want to tell you about the best way to celebrate a rebrand. Kelsey, tell us.
You got to get a ball pit.
You got to get a ball pit. Okay, well, why don't you tell us about what it was and when it was?
I think this is an example of getting really, really, really clear with your stakeholders up front. Because before we even started the Asana rebrand, Kramer made sure everyone knew that she required a ball pit at launch. Could we include a photo in the newsletter too?
Yeah, we can, because I make the newsletter, so we can do whatever we want, Kels. So the thing about the ball pit was that Asana had like 3 dots in the first logo, and then we rearranged the dots for the next one. So we did tons of things with like dots and like, I don't know, circle shapes, I guess. And I was like, there's got to be a ball pit. And so in the office, in the Mission in San Francisco, there was a ball pit at a party, and this was 2015. So it was like, we didn't know about germs then as much as we do now. So it felt okay. But not only was it a ball pit, they couldn't just figure out how to put a ball pit into like our eating area. So they put it in an inflatable mechanical bull pen. Like that's what it originally was. It was like an inflatable pool. So imagine like those mechanical bull like pens that are inflatable, but there was no bull because that would have been work inappropriate. But it was
But the ball pit's fine.
was totally fine. And it was like the best time I've ever had at work, but it was after work. It was so much fun. But I think the point is that we made it all of a celebration, and actually the whole like launch event and timeline was called like confetti, nothing to do with the sparkle emoji, but we really did make it feel like a big event and a celebratory thing, and it got everyone excited about the brand, not just people who worked on it.
And I do think there is, besides just the ball pit, I think there's a very good nugget lesson in there, which is that a brand redesign is maybe brought about or led by a marketing team, but the brand is something that is owned by every person.
Everyone's invited to the ball pit.
The company. And so everyone's invited to the ball pit. But I think thinking about what can you do to, not, you don't need the whole company's involvement, please, no, but like how do you make them feel like they have ownership over this? This is their celebration, milestone, achievement too, because the way you keep your brand consistent and excellent over time is that every person at the company is invested in the brand, and especially the brand strategy, because like a support person might not think they're a part of the company's brand, but they are, because they're having conversations with customers, for instance, and teaching them how to express that.
Love it. The ball pit also made a lot of sense because the big thing about Asana is like when you complete big projects, you should celebrate. So it was like very tied into it because we had
never miss a chance to reinforce your brand positioning, even as you're celebrating your rebrand.
The best thing about the ball pit was the people that loved the ball pit most were actually the engineers and the marketers, and rarely do those groups bond. So it was really just...
Brands bring people together.
I have to hand it to me on that idea. Like, really just outdid myself. And on that note, that is another episode of Dear Marketers.
Are we going to change who's most insufferable?
I was most insufferable today. So best marketer winner was Jenny. Most insufferable was me. Best guest co-host was Kelsey. Loudest dog was tie between Kelsey's dog and Jenny's dog, Boucle and Ollie. Although Dino made an appearance, but quiet. Anyway, that's another episode of Dear Marketers. Thanks, Jenny, Grace, and Kelsey for joining us. And we will be putting pictures of ball pits as well as budget information on rebrands right next to each other in the newsletter. So check that out too.
It's a wrap.
And thanks again to our partners for this episode, Typeform, Framer, and 42 Agency. You'll find discounts for all of them just for Dear Marketers listeners in the show notes. So thanks again, and thanks for listening.